her by going through all of them again. So we'll have the short version. The program itself, correct me if I'm wrong, is post-traumatic growth, mind-body tools to foster resilience and awaken to your potential. Dr. Schwartz like I said, has a lot of accomplishments, a PhD, licensed clinical psychologist, and other things. I think that'll probably be enough for her. She's also the author of 7 books dealing primarily with trauma, and the founder of the Center for Resilience Informed Therapy. I like this part of the bio, so I kept it. She believes that the journey of trauma recovery is an awakening of the spiritual heart, which is really a nice way to describe, I think, in a really beautiful way, what it is she's about. And I also was remembering something yesterday about the Divine Life Society in India, Swami Shivananda's ashram in Rishikesh. It was started in 1933. And Dr. Schwartz, I thought you'd be interested in this. There's different writings about it. Some of them sound a little bit like mission statements. So this is probably from early on, 1930s or so. And they're describing the Divine Life Society ashram offers a peaceful haven wherein is provided ample opportunity and actual help for the restoration of peace to the troubled, conflict-ridden, and psychologically traumatized personality of the modern man. So this is not a new phenomenon. This is something been going on for a long time. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to each and every one of you. Thank you for spending your time here. Great.
We can maybe do Triumvirate comes together and start her 108 for her birthday.
It's one of my favorite mantras, so I'll be happy to have that built in as well. How's my volume? It feels a little loud to me, but if it's working well out there, then I will go with it. Okay. All right. Yeah. Good. We're good. Okay. We're good. Good. Great. So I will make just a little bit of announcements here, and then we'll announce it again tonight so that you all know this for tomorrow, especially those that couldn't make today's session. I know a few people had treatments today. I mean, really, like choice. Have oil poured on your head and massaged, or, a lecture on trauma recovery. Okay. A few things about today. We're going to start with some lecture and some seated vagal toning practices. I'll describe what that is. We're going to go into some standing practices. So at some point, I'm going to invite us to just push all the chairs back or aside, and we'll do some movement practice today. I know that there's been quite a few of you going, I really want to move together with you. I like the movement practices that you do. Can you bring them in? So we're going to have some of that today. And tomorrow, I'm going to invite you to bring your yoga mats so that we can actually do a little bit of a longer movement practice together, mat-based practice together. So it's fun for me to come with a loose enough program that I can also adapt and shape it to what this group is wanting. And, I've been teaching this program on post-traumatic growth for many, many years. Probably, I mentioned last night, 2013 was maybe the first formal time that I gave this lecture, and so at least 12 years of this, and every single time it's different. Every single group of people brings it alive in a new way based on your questions and what you're hoping to get out of the experience, and that is something that for me I really deeply appreciate, because there's a uniqueness to each time that I bring this material out, and as a result it never gets boring for me, but it feels like it keeps getting renewed and enlivened, and I grow based on your questions and your inquiries and your shares. So grateful for all of that. So we are going to start with a poem once again, and I will invite you to receive this. Yes, the words will be on the screen, but you might just allow these words to wash over you for a moment. And this poem is called Remember by Brigitte Anna McNeil, who writes, "Remember who you are, not the shape others have put on you, not the story they handed you, not the lies or needs that were pressed into your psyche, not even your own imagined ideas of what you should be, but the real you, the wild, innate you that is breathing under all those should-bes. all those untruths. Remember the feel of it, the shape of it. Let it inhabit you like golden weeds rewilding the concrete. And so often, especially when we'll have the opportunity to move today and tomorrow together, what I'm really inviting is the instinctual body. So you'll get a sense as I offer these practices that it's not so much about matching a shape or trying to perfect a pose, right? We are very much listening to sensation and allowing that to guide you and honoring your body and honoring the wisdom that lives inside of your body rather than in any way trying to dominate or make the body perform in any way, shape, or form. And as we listen to our bodies bring forth a tremendous amount of intuition and instinctual knowing. I often liken this kind of deep inner knowing as something that lives within our gut. It lives within the digestive system, just literally, in the way that our guts help us recognize that which is nourishing for us and that which is waste that we don't need, it's not of us or part of us, and that which is toxic, that which is not digestible. And it's pretty simple. When we really listen to the gut, it's like, yeah, I like that. That feels good. That feels nourishing. Or we might listen to the gut and get feedback of like, no, that's not for me. It's just not of me. It's not for me. I don't want to bring that in. Or we might get a really strong no. That really doesn't feel good to me. That feels like a no. I'll give a little bit of an example of this. Some years ago, many years ago, I've been married for, it'll be 24 years this May. And so well before that, I was dating someone. It was one of those like long 3-month relationships. and throughout the 3 months, I had a knot in my solar plexus. There was something in me that was like, I don't feel right. This doesn't feel safe. There's something in my body that was saying no, but I didn't know that that's what that feeling was. And so I kept trying to figure out what was wrong with me and trying to fix myself to make this knot in my solar plexus go away, to make this persistent anxiety that lasted for those 3 months go away so that I could make myself be happy in a situation that actually wasn't nourishing. And when I ended the relationship, not even so much because of that, but there were some other things that I finally kind of saw and realized this wasn't for me. And I ended the relationship, the knot went away. And it wasn't until that point that I went, oh, that was my body saying no that entire time. And I was I was blaming the symptom for how I was feeling rather than listening to it. So you might even have your own reference points to where your body has actually said, that's not for me. You might even have your own reference points for what no feels like in your body. And hopefully, you also have some reference points for when your body says yes. And to have a felt sense inside of you of what yes feels like in your body. Right? Yes to, maybe no to the wind, but yes to that color of the water. Right? You can feel it out. And so the physiology of this gut-brain connection is very much connected to our vagus nerve. Our vagus nerve is the 10th cranial nerve. We have 12 cranial nerves. And the most of the cranial nerves are connected primarily around the sense organs of your head and kind of muscular actions around the eyes, the mouth, the tongue, your ears, and they all connect to your brainstem. What's different about the vagus nerve is that it's considered, vagus is Latin for wandering, and it's considered to be the nerve pathway that travels down all the way into your body, into your gut, into your reproductive organs, even your heart and lungs. And so it's often referred to as this mind-body superhighway of communication, of connection. And what's fascinating about the communication that happens between body and brain via your vagus nerve is that the majority of these communications are moving in the upward direction, meaning that 80% of the information is being carried from body to brain in an afferent direction toward your brain. So your physiology, your nervous system is prioritizing information from your body so that your brain can do the best job possible to take care of you. Most of our psychotherapies and trauma therapies out there are top-down models. They're working on changing how we think, changing our mindset to change our felt experience in the body. It's not a terrible approach. We have 20% neural connections that are going to support that. And we do want to be able to work with mindset. We do want to be able to work with intentionality. However, if that's all that we're doing psychotherapeutically, we're actually working against our biology. So when we can change how we feel from the bottom up, and we spoke about this a lot yesterday for those of you that were here, when we create more of that nervous system flexibility, when we create a sense of easefulness in the body, our minds will follow along. There's this beautiful phrase in the world of applied polyvagal theory by one of my fellow colleagues named Deb Dana. And she describes how story follows state, meaning that when we are in a nervous system of fight flight, when we're in our sympathetic nervous system and we're looking and vigilant for threats, right? Our stories, our narrative of the mind is going to match that physiological state. If we are in a state of shutdown and collapse and hopelessness and despair, and that felt sense in the body is shallow breathing and low muscular tone and fatigue, story follows state. Our mind is going to match that physiological experience. It's not such a bad thing, right? We're going to be able to sync up. And congruence is something our bodies love. We want to know how we feel, and we want to attach words to that. But if we're in chronic imbalanced states within the nervous system, we don't have the capacity to also uplift the mind through the cultivation of easeful states in embodiment, in the movement of breath, in the felt sense of okayness or deep relaxation, or empowerment in the body. So this quality of being able to pull in more easeful states from the bottom up is going to help our minds basically cultivate what if it's possible that I could feel okay right now? What if it's possible that I could feel joyful? What if it's possible that I could rest in stillness? This last phrase on this slide, the idea that the vagus nerve is more like a power cord. It's funny, I was telling Raj today I hadn't plugged in my computer for the last 2 lectures. My computer tends to hold its charge pretty well, but today I was like, I better plug in today, right? Like we all know the importance of a power cord, right? If you've ever traveled and left your charger at home, you're like, darn, I need to go buy a new charger. And but the vagus nerve gets a lot of hype in pop psychology right now. Hack the vagus nerve, biohack this, and so forth. And the changes actually aren't happening in the vagus nerve itself. They're happening in the brainstem. But we need to get that juice to the brainstem. We need to get that information about what's happening in your respiration, what's happening in your blood pressure, what's happening in body temperature, what's happening with your digestive organs. We need to get that information to the brainstem so that your brainstem can do an optimal job regulating all of those systems. One last thing about regulation and what we call homeostasis is that if you think about body temperature, for example, there's a pretty narrow window that helps us feel good in our bodies, right? 98.7, is that that's what we typically, 98.6, thank you. I was like, what's the number again? 98.6, I think I might run a little high. But we all have our range. And if we go even just a hair above that, 99, we feel it. We feel achy, we feel inflamed, right? And if we drop down too low, we feel it. So this mind-body connector is really working. Hey, virus here, bacteria here. We need to send more immune cells over here. We need to eject that food poison, right? Like all of these communications are managed via your vagus nerve. So it does so much to help you fine-tune that balance. Likewise, regulating your blood pressure, regulating your sleep-wake cycles. All of this is very much navigated through that vagus nerve brainstem connection. So let's do just a little experiential journey for a moment. I'm going to invite you to trace your vagus nerve with me, to just get to know where this travels. And we're going to start with what we call the upper ventral vagal, the upper circuit of your vagus nerve. The upper circuit descends from the forward part of your brainstem, so you can kind of even imagine the front of your brainstem, right at the base of your skull, has a ventral vagal circuit, a portion of the vagus nerve that comes out of there. And the first place that we'll visit where this ventral vagus goes is around your eyes. So I'm going to invite you just to orient to your eyes. You might even take your fingertips and notice with your fingertips, and notice in the sensing of your eyes if there's any tension, maybe a furrowing of your brow, maybe a tension headache. Maybe you've been spending a lot of time lately on computers. Now we've walked away from all of that, perhaps here at the ashram, here in our practices. So maybe you're noticing the opposite. Maybe you're starting to notice the tension leaving from that ocular zone around your eyes. Also knowing that your vagus nerve is very much engaged in whether your eyes are focusing on something close or far away, whether your pupils are dilating or are contracting. And your vagus nerve works very closely with all of the other cranial nerves, especially those in your face. They're kind of a concert or a symphony that all play together to create the music. The next place that I'll invite you to visit is around your mouth and jaw. Knowing that your vagus nerve works with glossopharyngeal and trigeminal nerves around eyes, mouth, jaw, and that your tongue, the tension perhaps in the muscles of your jaw, your smile muscles that lift up the corners of your lips and the corners of your eyes. All of that is very integrated with vagus nerve. And it's another place to notice through your own sensing, tension in your tongue, maybe tension in your jaw. You might open your jaw wide for a moment or contract it, like you're going to take a bite, and then softly separate upper and lower teeth. Soften your tongue away from the roof of your mouth. Sometimes without even knowing it, we carry tension in these places around eyes, mouth, jaw, as ways to clamp down on our emotions, as ways to mask how we're really feeling. Next place that I'll invite you to visit is your ears. And you can even just give them a little bit of love, a little contact with your fingertips to ears. And here I'll invite you to sense how your vagus nerve travels into the small muscles on the inner and middle ear. There's muscles there called the tensor tympani, and inside of these muscles of the ear, they contract a little bit and they slacken a little bit. And when the muscles of the ear have a good amount of tension, we actually want a certain degree of engagement of the muscles of the inner ear. It attunes our listening to the sound of the human voice. Attunes your listening to the sound of the human voice. In the same way that a baby begins to attune to the soothing tones of a mother's voice or a lullaby. And when our middle ear muscles sense those tones, it works in conjunction with your vagus nerve to communicate to your brainstem the cues of safety that allow you to go into restful states, the way that a soothing lullaby can put a child to sleep. You might even just sense a little bit of that sigh. You can give a little sound. Yeah, a little So the next place that we'll travel is to larynx and pharynx in your throat. When you tune into the muscles that your vocal cords and the muscles engaged in your voice tone, these are also innervated with the fibers of your vagus nerve, so that your voice can communicate to another the cues of safety and connection, and that will be directly transmitted into their ears, right? So we can offer, through time and space, vagus nerve to vagus nerve, through our voice tone, those cues of safety and connection. This upper vagal pathway is all about prioritizing connection as a biological imperative. We need connection with each other in order to thrive, in order to be our best selves. And so often when we've experienced trauma, especially relational trauma, these wounds get held in these very precious places of what we call our social nervous system, our social engagement system. Knots in the throat, clenching of the jaw, tension headaches around the eyes. You might also start to identify what we think of as some of our upper chakras, our upper energy centers, where the vagus nerve works very closely with endocrine system glands. Thyroid, parathyroid, pineal, pituitary. As we continue to travel this journey of the vagus nerve, you might bring your hands around heart and upper lungs. Again, knowing that the vagus nerve innervates into your heart, actually enters right into the sinoatrial node of your heart, what we call the heart's pacemaker, and then is receiving cues from your heart and sending that up to your brain. So it's this heart-mind, heart-brain connection that allows you, the functions of your brainstem, to help regulate your heartbeat, regulate your blood pressure. Also, some beautiful research about practices such as gratitude about how connecting to your heart, connecting to anything that brings you a genuine sense of warmth and appreciation and gratitude helps to soften what we call the heart protector in the traditional Chinese medicine system. That is the pericardium. It's a layer of fascia that surrounds the heart. And when we feel tense, on guard, vigilant, there's actually a tightening of that's connected to our diaphragm. We're going to talk more about that tomorrow. And when we receive those cues of safety and connection, when we tune into memories of times when we have felt warmth or a genuine sense of appreciation, the heart literally opens, expands. That heart protector begins to soften and make space. Make more space for you. And allowing yourself to also maybe sense into your lungs, the movement of the rib cage, knowing that these vagal fibers, it's not just a singular nerve, it's a nerve with thousands of nerve endings extending off from that central nerve pathway that are going to receive feedback from your lungs, your heart, your movement of your rib cage that says, oh, there's enough oxygen, or wow, there's a little bit too much carbon dioxide in the bloodstream, and it's going to sense through subtle chemoreceptor endings the difference in the chemical balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide within the bloodstream. It's really profound, all of this information that this one nerve pathway and all of its extensions is gathering. Giving cues when we're safe that allows us to take deep, full breaths that not only expand the lungs, but expand the heart. And also, when we're not safe, when there's a threat out there, that will literally change how we breathe and change our relationship to where the blood is flowing in the body so that we're going to be prepared to fight flight. However, if we're safe, the vagus nerve then descends below the diaphragm. It travels through the diaphragm. And again, we'll talk more about that tomorrow when we get into some breath experience as well. Descends down into your digestive organs. And when we have enough cues of safety and connection, we go into that rest and digest response. Even, and I don't have it on the slide here, but you might even take one hand to the back of your sacrum and one hand here at your low belly. And sensing the way that your vagus nerve and your autonomic system travels all the way down to this wise, bony structure of your sacrum at the base of your spine, down around your tailbone, your pelvic floor. And even though we don't have lungs that extend down into low belly and the sacrum and the pelvic floor, we can sense when we have prana that's moving there. We can sense how we can breathe, and you might even experiment with this for a moment, of breathing into the space between your hands. Allowing a little bit of subtle movement and sensing the way that your vagus nerve works with your cranial sacral system, your cerebrospinal fluid, that in the context of safety and connection allows all of that to be part of the symphony. To be part of the symphony. And then you can let your hands just rest, sensing what do you notice in your body, even with this guided journey into your own vagus nerve, and how that travels wisely through. We're going to continue with some guided practices, just a little bit of information in between before we go into the next guided practice. So much of what I teach in my work is what we'll call natural vagus nerve stimulation. And this is facilitating the smooth transitions between the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the autonomic nervous system. We spent a lot of time yesterday focusing on that. Again, yawns are very good complementary responses to this work. Let them happen. Yeah. That's a signal that your system is downregulating and something is opening up. So it's also its own little source of vagus nerve stimulation. So yawns are always delightful. And what we're working towards, especially for so many of us who have been sympathetically dominant in our world, in the go-go, who have been stuck in maybe ongoing trauma states that have kept us in that sympathetic dominance, most often what we're cultivating is the capacity to engage in more of that parasympathetic. And that's why there's a whole teacher training happening right now just on Yoga Nidra, because it's such a deep, deep valued need that is, very missing often in our culture. I tend to use the words natural vagus nerve stimulation or neuromodulation versus the biohacking language that's out there, in part because I've had my website hacked before and it doesn't have good associations. I once opened up my website and there was a cobra sitting there going, nee, 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 nee. Like the music was playing, "You've been hacked." And I was like, what just happened? Thank goodness for good web support, tech support people that reclaimed my intellectual property. All right. So that was an aside. It was a sympathetic moment in time, and grateful for all the practices that helped me come back. So I think of these practices as the gentle awakening of the ventral vagal circuit. I defined ventral vagal as coming out of the front of the brainstem, and it primarily travels from heart, lungs, larynx, pharynx, and muscles of the face, ears. We have another vagal circuit, and that's why there's a distinction between a ventral vagal circuit. The secondary vagal circuit is what we call the dorsal vagal circuit. The dorsal vagal travels down from the backside. Dorsal anatomically simply refers to back, and the dorsal descends from the backside of your brainstem. And the biggest difference, there's some shared neural circuitry between dorsal and vagal in heart, lungs, and even into the face. But the big difference between the dorsal vagal circuit is that the dorsal vagal circuit goes through the diaphragm and extends into the digestive and reproductive organs. So we traced the entire circuit together, but that dorsal vagal circuit is what moves into the lower body. And when we feel safe, that dorsal vagal circuit takes us into rest and digest. When we experience threat, especially ongoing, unremitting, no escape, feeling trapped, life-threatening danger in some cases, that dorsal vagal circuit has an evolutionarily older expression that brings us into an immobilization response for basically a last-ditch attempt to survive those kinds of threats. And sometimes if we've experienced ongoing chronic chronicity of trauma, we may get kind of stuck in that state of not necessarily a full-on faint response or a feigned death response, but variants of that in which our nervous system gets stuck in forms of what we call dysautonomia or dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system. So we might have, in those cases, more symptoms of vertigo, dizziness, nausea, chronic fatigue, chronic inflammation. Sometimes it can even be associated with autoimmune conditions because when we think of this smooth transition between sympathetic and parasympathetic, the optimal vagal tone, that keeps all of our bodily systems in states of health. So works closely, our nervous system works closely with our endocrine system, works closely with our digestive system, our immune system, and so on and so forth. Cardiovascular, you really could name all of the systems, again, being part of the symphony of health. So when we have imbalances in our autonomic nervous system, those imbalances will typically start to show up across multiple systems in the body. So when we engage in the practices that we're going to go into here, much of what we're tapping into or tuning into, and some of you will even have a reference point of the points that we're going to make contact with that are familiar with tapping practices, that are the same points, but that what we're working with is how do we stimulate the vagus nerve within a context of social connection. It's like a double bonus. It's like extra good because not only is our nervous system responding to where we're making contact with the vagus nerve that comes very close to the surface of your skin, but then because our vagus nerve is wired for connection and cues of safety that come through the facial expressions, the soft smile, the voice tone, and so forth, we have this way of actually allowing all of that to be nourishing our nervous system simultaneously. So I really love to teach these programs in group settings because it becomes an extra layer of support for this. And if you are doing this on your own, which I'm going to encourage us all to do, these are part of my daily practice, and I'll be guiding you through my that part of my daily practice. That we're also allowing our nervous systems to attune to the cues that let us know that we're safe enough now, that we have some quality of choice, which we spoke about yesterday. Choice facilitates safety. I'm choosing to do this practice. It feels good for me. If we go into a practice because somebody told me to and I have to, what is our nervous system interpreting in those moments if it doesn't feel intuitively right to you? So I want you to really tune into how does your body say yes to a practice? And just because I say, hey, this is part of my daily practice, it doesn't mean that it has to be your daily practice. So really allow yourself to listen in and sense, is my body saying yes to this? And how does my body say yes? Or is my body saying, no, this doesn't feel right to me, right? And sometimes that's the case as well. And there's nothing wrong with that. That means that's why we have an array of practices and listened to that truth, right? I personally don't do headstands. I'm just going to be frank about that. Like, I don't do them because I had a history of 4 car accidents that created some instability. I also have a little bit of low tone in some of the muscles around my upper cervical vertebrae. Headstands put me into a imbalance in my nervous system. I love forearm stands. I love handstands. I love inversions. But I'm also very, very mindful of how my body says no to the practices that aren't right for me. So, especially when we go into some of the advanced practices here, really, really important to listen to your body. So the practices ultimately are really meant to be soothing and stimulating. Soothing and stimulating. So it doesn't mean that these practices are always about down regulating out of sympathetic states, because sometimes we can get stuck in that collapse, that fatigue, higher inflammation, etc. In those cases, an ice pack might be your best friend, or splashing really cold water on your face, or for some of you, maybe jumping into a cold plunge, right? So sometimes those are very stimulating for the vagus nerve, but as you can imagine, it's got an upregulating function to it to take us out of some of that stuckness in the downregulated states. So here's where we'll go into some of the natural vagus nerve stimulation. This particular image here gives you a little bit of a sense of the vagus nerve in yellow, the trigeminal nerve in the orange, and how those nerves really work in concert with each other. When I talked to Dr. Stephen Porges, one of my mentors, about this, one of the things that he says is that that really all of these cranial nerves work together with the vagus nerve. In some ways, you can think of them as all kind of extensions that are of the same. In a sense, they're all again instruments in the symphony. So you'll get a sense of this trigeminal nerve in some of the practices that we're doing, especially above the eyebrow, between the eyebrows, below the eye, above the cheekbone, to the inside of the nostril of the nose, or just the outside of, not inside your nose. But although that is vagus nerve stimulation, I'll tell you, picking your nose is definitely vagus nerve stimulation. You watch kids do it all the time. They're regulating their nervous system. But anyhow, just to the outside of your nostril, and then underneath your cheekbone, we're going to go to the ears, and then we'll greet some of the jaw as well. The first practice that I want to offer here is something that has been widely researched, and this is havening touch. I'm going to teach this in the form of self-havening, although havening touch is something that we can also offer to another person. And so sometimes the profound gift of giving havening touch to another person, it is just like a beautiful offering to receive someone else's touch sweeping across your forehead, your arms, and really touching your palms. And I think very often we naturally haven each other without even realizing it. Like when we're, kind of caring for someone else and we're just, stroking their arm, or when we're caring for a child who, who's come up to us or he was even unwell, we stroke their face. We even haven our pets. Right? You're like, yeah, we do. And the fun thing about offering havening touch is that some of the touch receptors that are very sensitive to touch live in the palms of our own hands. And so even when we're offering havening touch, we're also receiving havening touch. So touch helps to reduce heart rate and blood pressure and lowers norepinephrine and cortisol, or our stress hormones. It increases our feel-good body chemicals, oxytocin, GABA, serotonin, and increases our positive emotions. So we'll work with a few of these touch points. There are special touch receptors that have been researched. They're called C-tactile fibers. You probably know about these. And the C-tactile fibers are in high concentration in the palms of our hands, in our face, and interestingly enough, on the outsides of the upper arms. They're also actually on the legs as well. And so sometimes you might even feel that quality of touching your own upper thighs and just moving in this downward motion, and you're like, oh, I didn't even know I was havening, but I was havening when I was doing that. It's so soothing. But we'll work with the 3 upper points. So the first invitation is to just take your palms and to experiment with this felt sense of giving and receiving your own touch. And unlike some of those movements where we rub the palms vigorously, although that's actually really lovely as well, but this one is slower. This one is slower. And something that is kind of fun is that once you start to get to know these movements, you'll start to just spontaneously do them. Like, ooh, there was a stressful moment. And then you're like, oh yeah, I'm havening. Okay, good, I'm havening. And nobody even needs to really know why you're doing this with your hands. Like, it's something you can do anywhere. And even if you're in a meeting, you can do this under the table. Like, what are they doing? No, you're just havening. Just havening. All right, next touch point. Next touch point is your forehead. And again, we're going for what feels good. So if there's ever anything that I'm offering, it is that doesn't feel right for you, just skip it. Because again, it's meant to feel good. Maybe maybe not. Or depending on the meeting, maybe you can ask everyone, hey, can we just take a pause and haven together? Oh, right. And you can even greet your scalp line, right? Like this is another place where you can muss up your hair. This is my favorite part of a massage. Oh, it feels so good. Yeah, sounds and sighs are totally welcome because they kind of come naturally with the territory. Like, oh, yeah. Oh, good. Yeah. Next invitation is your cheeks. I'm turning my mic down for a second, but you'll get the picture. I'm just going to take it off for a sec. Watch. And you can stay in any place as long as you'd like. Next invitation is shoulders down towards elbows. And perfectly okay if you're over your clothing or if you're right on the skin. It works either way. One of the common questions that comes up with this one is, should I go up and down or just in the downward? Feel it out for yourself. Your body will tell you. And the research suggests that the downward motion is following the directionality of the touch fibers in the skin. So if you imagine, yeah, and we could even haven on you if you can't do both arms at once, right? Yeah. You can imagine the petting a cat or a dog, how there's a directionality to the fur, right? So there's a quality of following that directionality, following the way that the small, tiny hair follicle fibers of your skin are kind of built to receive that touch. And then I'll invite you to pause for a moment. And noticing how your body responded, how you feel now. Anyone else feel, And if that's not the case, right, I've taught this literally to thousands and thousands of people, and sometimes people say, I feel really emotional, or, wow, I feel a little bit shaky inside. It brings up some different feelings for different people. Sometimes when we feel these cues of safety come in, we feel safe enough to feel our vulnerability or to feel safe enough to feel where we felt unsafe. So being with whatever comes up, knowing that that is the right response, because whatever does come to the surface of your awareness is now available to be held and honored, known, listened to. Yeah. Next practice, if you would like to join in another one, what I will honor or what I will offer here is when we stack vagal toning practices one after another, it is important to keep in mind that that you're bringing a lot of input into your nervous system, and you might hit a saturation point. You might be like, okay, I don't want to do another one because I feel like that gave me enough to work with. And if I continue to open up the gates, there might be more coming through than I can really digest at any one time. So I'll teach these and know that you can come back to them as needed if now is not the right moment. So the vagus nerve comes very close to the surface of your skin, and it works, as I've named already, with other cranial nerves. It's in some areas of your skin sitting about a quarter of a centimeter below the surface of your skin. That is how close the vagus nerve travels to your skin. And so the points that I'm going to show you today are also corresponding with the acupuncture points in the traditional Chinese medicine tradition, and they are also correlated to the health of vital organs in your body. We can think of these like meridians, or in our yogic system, the nadis that we're stimulating here. And today we're going to work with gentle self-massage, but you will recognize these points for those of you that know the tapping emotional freedom technique. These points have correspondence to those, and I've spoken to some of the research directors that are looking at EFT and its relationship to the vagus nerve, and recognizing that that is part of why EFT works as well. So the points that we'll be working with today, we're going to work with 3 of them, although you could add on and work with the point above the lip and below the lip. So Betty, when we were speaking yesterday, I was like, oh, wait, it's coming. We're going to talk about this today. Betty over here is a craniosacral therapist and biodynamic training, and we were talking about some of the points that are very similar within that tradition as well. So the first point that we'll work with is between the eyebrows. It's not in the order in the lower bullet points here, but we're going to work with that urinary bladder point, the releasing stress or bringing bright light to the eyes within the Chinese meridian system. And I have a book recommendation for you if you're curious to learn more about the practices that I'm teaching you, especially these practices. They come from a book called Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve. There's a lot of books out there about the vagus nerve nowadays. Again, it's become a very kind of pop psychology topic. But if you were to invest in one, that's the one that I'm going to recommend, because he worked very closely with Dr. Stephen Porges, and he himself was also a craniosacral therapist, and very much has a great depth of understanding that's, again, not just kind of going in and biohacking the nervous system. So yes, Accessing the Healing Power of the Vagus Nerve by Stanley Rosenberg. And I feel very grateful to have been able to work with his group. He died a few years ago, and I received I feel like I was granted permission to carry his teachings forward in a formal way, and that I take as a tremendous honor. And it is also my honor to pass these traditions onto you, these practices onto you, and to actually invite you to share these with your communities, because they are so powerful. I really believe that we can change the world one nervous system at a time. So, yeah, right? It's touching. Yeah. Thank you. All righty. So we're going to start with the between the brows points. I will say that in the future, I'm going to suggest that you do one side at a time, just to really feel the difference between both sides. For our time's sake, we're going to do both sides together, because I want to bring in a few more practices as well. So I'm going to invite you to take maybe just 2 fingertips to the space between your eyebrows. And so one finger on each side. You can choose what finger feels right. And I'm going to say, with this practice, less is more. Less is more. So you might start just simply making contact, and pause in stillness long enough until you sense that your face has registered that contact of your fingertips. And ask your face if it's a yes. So it can be very light touch. And if you get a sense of yes, you might bring in some very gentle circular movements. And you might experiment for yourself whether those movements, they can be super small, whether those movements feel good with a clockwise or a counterclockwise direction. You can try each directionality of the circling. You might find that one finger is going one direction and the other the opposite, kind of matching, that they're both going from out to in or in to out. And see which one which of those circular movements feels more like a yes. And just like we might kind of get little knots in the muscles of our shoulders or our back, we can get tiny little knots in the fascia of the face. And the fascia of the face is delicate, so knowing that as you're applying this touch, you don't have to press very hard in order for it to be effective. And if you do find a place that feels a little bit knotted or knotty, you can pause there and give that a little bit of love. You can really focus the pressure of your fingertips or that circular movement in places that would like a little bit more contact. And then I add on to this a sweeping movement across the tops of your eyebrows. So once you feel like you're content with those circular movements in between the eyebrows, you can then start to sweep up and across and over the tops. And in doing so, you might again find little spots that are calling for your attention, and you can pause there. Give a little bit of love or circular movement or pressure, and then give another sweep. The next invitation is to take your fingertips to the bridge of your nose, and then you can once again pause for a moment. And then moving outward across the tops of your cheekbones towards the center of your kind of, if you were looking forward, if your eyes are open and you're looking straight forward, you would be right underneath your pupils. So it's a nice way to find that spot. And you can also just listen with your fingertips that as you're moving along the tops of your cheekbones, you might just simply find a spot that says, more please, or is slightly sensitive. Again, we're working with the trigeminal nerve as well as the vagus nerve here. Trigeminal nerve simply means the three-part nerve, as it goes around the eyes and above and below the cheekbones, above and below your jaw. If you do find a sensitive spot, you can again add some circular movements. Listening for the feeling of the face and how the tissues of your face might say yes or no. And then you can find some broad sweeping movements across your cheekbones. Beautiful. The next one here, and I'm just going to show this on one side because of my microphone, is to take your fingertip to the outside of your nostril. And then from there, it's just slightly outward. And this one is often referred to as the large intestine point, letting go of grief, releasing grief. And can sometimes be tender. So as you're sliding out from your outer nostril, it's just like a 1/4 inch away. But the nice thing is we're not working with the tip of a needle. We're working with your fingertip. And so you might find that there's several spots that are calling for your attention as you slide outward underneath your cheekbones. Yeah, yawns are good. Sounds are fine. Always welcome. Yeah. the other side's calling, so I'm going to move my mic. Good. So you can always stay in any of these points longer. You can just kind of do that broad sweep below the cheekbones, finding any other points that are calling for your touch, your attention. I'm going to take us into the next one here, which is the natural vagus nerve stimulation of the ears. Right in front of the ear, there's a bit of cartilage that's called the tragus. And then, of course, we have the so many vagal fibers happening around the earlobe. It's why a lot of the auricular acupuncture is become so popular for acudetox and so forth. There's also an area of the ear called the concha or the concha. It's like a conch shell. It's the area that surrounds the ear canal. So we're not putting our fingers in the ear, but in the area that surrounds it. And with this one, again, you can take your fingers to that tragus, thumbs behind, fingers in front. The ears are the most popular area in the science of bioelectronic medicine that provide vagus nerve stimulation devices that are purchasable, and they create little transcutaneous stimulation of the vagus nerve. And we have our free devices right here with us that travel everywhere and don't cost a thing, right? Your own hands. So my thumb is behind the tragus and my finger in front. And I like to just give it a little bit of a squeeze, like a love squeeze. When working with the concha, I work with fingertips and just getting in there. It's one of the things that the vagus nerve stimulation devices haven't figured out how to clip on to this part of the ear. So it's a little bit easier to do with your own fingertips. And then you can also roll your earlobes out and in. I often get the question about things like piercings and piercing the tragus and whether that's a form of vagus nerve stimulation. In some ways, yes, and it doesn't create harm. And there's also ways in which we have enough vagal fibers that travel through these areas that it's not like you're going to pierce just the vagus nerve. Like it's a lot of fibers that are in there. In fact, when we look at the frequency of how often might we do a vagus nerve stimulation in any one day, and you can keep going as long as you want with this. Generally, so they have also bioelectronic devices that get surgically implanted for epilepsy and rheumatoid arthritis. And anyone here have one? I always like to ask that question because sometimes I'll have people in my trainings that have one, specifically often for epilepsy. And they're quite effective. Sometimes over time they wear off and they have to be kind of like readjusted in terms of their frequency. A friend of mine had gotten one for her epilepsy because she wanted to get pregnant, and she did. You have one, or you're waiting? No, you have a question. And she, I asked her how frequently hers stimulated the vagus nerve. Every 5 minutes. Right. Yeah, that's pretty cool. So how often does our nervous system need a little bit of stimulation or input? Pretty often. As you come out of that practice, what are you noticing? What's the feeling of your face? Can any of you feel it? Yeah? You want to just give a shout out? Yeah. Nice and loud, would you? Uh-huh. Yeah, I can. I would probably start just even with the super duper light touch And, I would be very curious, so that I'm going to repeat the question just because it was hard to hear, that even with light touch, that these spots were very sore. And could you share a little bit about why and what to do? So the what to do is not even to give any pressure. It's like the lightest touch. And why might it be sore? We're also working with sinus cavities, and so if there's any history, and you're nodding, I'm curious if there's any history of sinus inflammation. Sometimes that might be a reason for soreness. And like I said, these are common places where we can hold tension in the face. I'll share a bit of a personal example. For me, in growing up I had two households that I grew up in between, because my parents got divorced when I was 2.5, 3, and one of those households was a profoundly safe household, and one really wasn't. And at the household where I didn't feel safe, I really had to learn how to mask what I was showing on my face, because it didn't feel safe for me to reveal my emotional vulnerability. And so I froze the muscles of the face. I mean, not literally, but in some ways I just had to, because I'm a very expressive person, like I really like to express who I am. So in order to not do that, I actually had to tense up the muscles to not show what I was feeling. And as a result, I was prone to more headaches and discomfort in the face. So I don't know if either of those narratives resonate. Yeah. Okay. So let's do another one, shall we? Are we okay to go on? Yeah. Okay. Good. We're liking this. All right. Next one here is is working with where the vagus nerve connects to the jaw a little bit more, and our temporalis and masseter muscles. So you can, I'll talk you through, and then I'm going to just show you without the mic for a second. But basically, we have, as you can see in the image on the right side, the way that the vagus nerve travels up along the side of the cranium, and then also along into the jaw. And so, we'll do the practice here in a second. I'll just show you one other part of this. We also, if we look towards the back of the skull, we have ways in which the vagus nerve is traveling alongside the back of the neck, and then again towards the base of the occiput, or the base of the skull. And so self-massage there, especially when we have tight muscles, which many of us do around the occiput, it begins to restrict the blood flow to the vagus nerve and to the brain stem. And so we're going to work a little bit to open that up. And here are a few practices that we'll do together. So the first of these is to work with that masseter and temporalis. And so as we do this, and I'm going to take this down, I'll speak loudly, and then I'll put my mic back on for the sake of anyone that's catching this via recording. And then continue upward. And you can find that on both sides. We'll all come out of here with very mussed hair, and we had a really good nap. And then you can stay with that one for as long as you'd like. Getting into the masseter, I'm going to invite you to take your knuckles and just slide downwards. So you're going to catch underneath your cheekbone. And this one can generally tolerate a little bit of a firmer touch. These are very strong muscles. And if you have a tendency to grip your jaw, grind your teeth, have any TMJ, these will also probably feel kind of sore. So you can give it some meeting of the tension, but also be honoring. I'm just going to put the mic back on for a moment. So for that masseter, fanning your fingers, moving upward, and the temporalis, taking your knuckle and moving downward. It's very valuable in this one to slack your jaw. And maybe even just, yeah, good sound. And if your jaw tends to hurt, you go, oh, sometimes it hurts so much. Yeah, exactly. Oh, honor that. Oh, yeah, exactly. We have the sounds. All right. Yeah. Next, I'm going to do them out of order. I want to do this one next. Next invitation is to take your fingers like V's, like little peace signs, and take one finger in front of your ear, one behind, and then you're going to massage up and down in front of your ears, behind your ears, and another one where you can go, oh, that hurts. Ah. Am I the only one? No. Oh, sometimes I grip my jaw. Oh, good. Letting something go. Beautiful. All right. Next invitation. Hands on your upper chest. One hand over the other is a little fascial release here in the upper chest. And this time we're going to drag the hands down, kind of let your hands be weighted on your upper chest. And as they're dragging that fascia down, and you sometimes need to kind of re-grip, you can loosen, move up a little bit, re-grip, drag it down, and then lift your head. It doesn't have to drop back. You're just kind of lifting your jaw, and you're going to jut your lower jaw forward. And again, you can catch that a few times. Curl forward with your head, catch the skin of the upper chest, and then lift and reach your jaw. Maybe lower your shoulders. Maybe lower your shoulders. I'll say that again. Okay. And then again, catch it. Drag, lift. And we can also do a variation of that side to side. So you can kind of catch, I'm going to take my left hand, right shoulder, but let me mirror you. Left hand, right shoulder, and right hand on top. And then I'm going to drag down, and as I drag down and away, I'm going to lift my head in the opposite direction, jut your jaw. Oh, right? Yes, seriously. Didn't even know all that tension was in there, did ya? All right, let's do that one more time. And you can go so loving, so gentle. That tension took time to get there. Don't feel like you have to get it all out at once. Let's do the other side. Yeah. I love doing this in person. I've been teaching this so often online, and I don't get all the sounds back. Like, oh. So again, you're going to take right hand, left shoulder, left hand, right, left shoulder on top, left hand on top. Reach the opposite direction. It's hard to do that. Talk that through. Jut your jaw. And then back to center. Ooh, maybe roll your shoulders for a second. Let that one go. So part of what I just want to name here in a brief pause, and I'll actually name it just while we do this little bit of a K27 point. You can see it on the slide here. Just self-massage right under your collarbones. And I'll just speak this out while we do a little self-massage right here. That the muscles that we're opening up are the muscles that are very often linked to really early preverbal or attachment-related trauma. Think about a baby reaching for the eyes, the breast, the the nourishment being held by a mom, or you can imagine a baby that didn't necessarily have that kind of nourishment coming back, the kinds of wounds that can happen in that early phase. So opening up neck, jaw, face, muscles around the mouth can be very tender sometimes. So if you notice after this practice, you're like, ooh, I feel really tender today, be really gentle. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah. And then last little bit here is to come around to the base of your skull. It's a little easier without a mic. And you can use one hand or two hands. And again, so loving, so gentle, especially if you're working with very young parts of you that show up in these practices, like you're holding the head of the most beloved newborn and welcoming that new you into the world. Nothing that we're forcing change around. We're just holding, loving, maybe a little self-massage, little circular movements. So loving, so gentle. Yeah, good, yeah. Yeah, beautiful question. So can this also help with migraines? As someone who has had migraines for years and years, these reduce the intensity, the frequency, the duration of my migraines exponentially. And they're hormonal, so sometimes I'll still get like the pre-post migrainal symptoms, but I don't get the headache symptom, which is pretty wild. So I can kind of know when a migraine's happening, but I won't have it light up all of the nerve pathways. All right. Be gentle. It's a lot of input. So you might hit saturation point, and you might say that was enough. This next is really just an image. This one's just an image to say, we might not get all of our movement in today. I feel like it was good to just stretch this and linger and take this all out. We'll do the movement practice tomorrow if we don't get to that today, because we'll have plenty of time to get it all in. But I want to just kind of take a pause, even with this image. It's a powerful image that we can see how the vagus nerve wraps itself around and under the aortic arch of the heart. It actually goes inside, literally inside your heart. But I love this image of the vagus nerve descending down, wrapping below the heart. So we know it's going ears, throat, heart, and then it has one pathway that wraps back up to your throat. Is that the coolest thing? So we can feel, the ears, heart, throat, voice connection. And when we feel that knot in our throat, the catch in our voice, the difficulty expressing ourselves in the world, the vulnerability of that, your vagus nerve is protecting you. It functioned in one way or another to say, maybe your most precious, authentic voice isn't going to be recognized by this person or held in the most respectful, dignified way by that person. And in some ways, it actually says, don't bring your voice here. We'll save it for a worthy recipient. Yeah. And in our yogic practices, we have so many ways in which we're working with reclaiming this pathway in the context of safety. So when we bring in a ha-kara breath or an ujjayi pranayama, we are giving our voice back to ourselves. We are allowing ourselves to open this up slowly in a warming and a loving way. In the yogic practice of Brahmari pranayama, or a humming bee practice, another way in which we are tuning in, and of course we can add oming, chanting together, all of the ways in which we're waking up the voice, So beautiful, beautiful pathways that we are opening up together. Yeah. We'll do a little bit. I'm going to actually share with you the VU practice. Any of you here familiar with VU? Oh, good. I get to bring that to a lot of folks that are new to it. Some of you are familiar. Yeah. The VU practice is a practice offered by Peter Levine, and we can work with this sound, and again, you could work with Om, you can create a hum, you can do whatever you'd like that really resonates for you. I'll offer VU. And one of the ways that's really lovely to imagine this, especially if you're coming out of states of fatigue or brain fog or fogginess or just disorientation. VU, I love to imagine like it's the foghorn calling the ship back home to the shore, safely guiding us through the fog. Yeah. What's that? VU, V-O-O, and it's up on the slide. Yeah. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, it's way up there for you. So all good. And VU, V-O-O. And traditionally with this one, it's a good one for the lower vagus because we can give a nice VU, like that foghorn. And you might even sense the vibration of the VU deep down in your belly. Now, Brahmari pranayama is a really an interesting addition, and you might play with it, which is, I'll offer the simple version, which is to cup your hands over your ears, and it will amplify the resonance of your own voice, and you can feel the vibration in all the way through your body. If that low tone VU in any way doesn't feel right for you, you can shift the tone and go a little bit higher. It'll bring the vibration more. The higher you create the sound, it'll bring it into your chest or your throat or your head even. So you get to play with your vocalization. I'm going to offer us that low VU, that foghorn VU here. So if that feels right, and maybe with your hands coming into the sound together, inhale. You're your own tuning fork. Yeah. It was good? Yeah. 1 second. Yeah, that was really profound for me. I felt the vibration go all the way down my legs to my feet today. It was like my whole entire legs vibrated with the sound. So maybe that was some of the collective energy of doing this in person. I can still feel my feet vibrating. So beautiful. Let's pause here. We'll bring in the rest tomorrow, and let's take some questions. I see a question here, and I think we'll use the mic for questions, which will keep me from having to repeat it. There's also an extra mic up here. Okay, good. You've got one there. Use the other one, he says. Oop. Ooh, no. Okay. Yeah, thank you. And you have a question as well? Yeah, we'll get to you. Good.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for all this beautiful information and presentation. I've really enjoyed it. Unfortunately, I'm leaving tomorrow, so this would be my one question.
Okay.
I have been in practices where the hummingbird, the VU, they suggest that you put your thumbs in your ears and your fingers across. Yes. Now, is that something that also would speak to the nerves and the work that you're doing?
You're keyed in. Exactly. It's like, oh, let's get it all in at once. And yes to the ear stimulation, yes to the stimulation of the vagus nerve and the trigeminal here. And it also supports the pratyahara of our yogic practice because we are drawing the sensory experience inward. We're closing off the sense organs of the ears and the eyes to the outer world so that we can really attune to that inner sensory knowing. Yeah, beautiful question. Thank you. Yeah. I know there's some more questions percolating. Yeah, here. And also just shares feedback about the practices. How are you feeling? What are you noticing? Yes.
Yeah, I just was thinking about the VU, and would it be the same effect with Om?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And also, I just sort of share just a comment. I injured my neck. I have a pulled muscle from a couple of days ago, and I'm just realizing now how close it is to the vagus nerve and how I was even breathing differently in the last few days. And this has allowed me to just have more self-compassion and realizing like that's probably why I'm feeling extra off. So
I love that you brought that in. For me, when I first learned all of I trained in a model called the Applied Polyvagal Model, and when I first trained in this, I really felt like it was the most compassionate way of understanding ourselves and our nervous systems and our trauma symptoms. It's just, yeah, thank you. We can just maybe send the mic over this direction. We've got another one right up here in front. Yeah.
Question. When I was doing this motion, right?
The K27, yeah.
I became emotional. You
Yes.
know, the emotion came up. So I was wondering how often, I know where they're coming from. When I was born, two of my clavicles were broken. So I had very long traumatic birth process, but also my both clavicles were broken, and I've been basically tied up as a newborn. So, personal question: how can I work with this practice in loving way, not to overwhelm myself?
Today, did you feel overwhelmed by that emotion?
A little bit, yes.
A little bit, yeah, and it's still right there. Yeah, I would say that as you work with this therapeutically, that it's a good practice for you to bring in to your own therapy healing that you're working with someone individually. That this would be a beautiful practice to say, I found a way into that deep early emotion.
So like internal family systems, I work with
Perfect.
parts.
Perfect.
Okay.
I found a way to make contact with that infant whose collarbones were broken and had to be bound in a cast, I'm assuming, for some time. And so you have an access point to that wound that now allows you to work with it.
Thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
Thank you.
Yeah. I know there's a question over here. Yeah. Yeah, take your time on
Yeah. So thanks a lot. All the massaging like made me yawn so much,
Yeah.
and I think I hold a lot of stress or a lot of my jaw, like it's like clenching at night. I don't even realize,
Uh-huh.
like to the breaking my tooth. Like
Ooh.
yeah,
Yeah.
I guess it's like coming from my upbringing, alcoholic father in the family. So, what could you suggest to that?
Yeah. So another really beautiful example of how these practices, I call these the unwinding trauma from the nervous system practices. And so to work really slowly, I mentioned earlier that we didn't accumulate that much tension in our jaws overnight. It came across many, many years, and especially in early development, it might have gone across, from birth until, still teenagers, right? Many years of accumulation of tension. So when you're unwinding that, go super slow. Bring this in as a daily practice. Do it before bed. But also, similar to my response to Anya, start to pay attention to, as I do this practice, can I start to attune to what emotions might be held in that come to the surface of my awareness as I'm working with these release points, and that you might go, oh honey, oh, like when I was doing the practice, I go, oh, I hold so much tension here, oh, it hurts so much. Like when we talk to ourselves so lovingly to our tension and we give it a voice, we can dialogue with that tension. We can start to get to know, what is that holding for you? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. If you're not in a rush, okay, we'll take a few more questions. I know there's a few over here, and then one over here. So yeah.
Hi. Thank you so much for the lecture. Had was at the beginning when you're speaking about listening to what is yes and what is no. What my question really was is, of doing what feels good is how do you really address, or what is the process when like your circumstances, life upbringing, choices, responsibilities, obligations of listening to what is right and good for you and doing that is totally disregarded and pretty much irrelevant.
Yeah.
And how do you then have the intuition when you really can't, because doing what's right isn't a choice? How do you really...
And is that still true now?
Yeah, but now it looks differently, where it's like my responsibilities, my obligations, fulfilling my commitments, doing what I need to do, pretty much, like in whatever form it looks like, although it looks differently than the past. It's then making big choices to change your life around that.
Yeah.
It's not really an option. And so it's kind of like, how do you do that when you just, it feels like you can't?
Yeah. I really hear that. I really hear that with your experience and with the with the truth of that right now you're in life circumstances where they're in contradiction to what you can listen to and honor for yourself. And I remember some years ago with my meditation teacher, I started working with her, and she said, sometimes around year 4 of meditation, you realize that your life circumstances and your inner world might not be matching. And I was like, and it happened. And I was like, oh, wow. Like really, once I really started to listen to, thank you, it's a little loud. When I really started to listen to myself and realized that some of the circumstances or relationships of my life weren't a match, then it becomes oh boy, what do I do now? What do I need to change to better match the yes inside of me with my outer circumstances? And the real challenge happens when we don't have a lot of choices around it. The real challenge happens, and I see the emotional bind that's there for you. I don't have the answer to the emotional bind other than perhaps for now the honoring and the listening to that truth will keep it awake and alive like a flame that you don't let burn out, so that you at least know who you are, even if you can't fully live into who you are inside of those circumstances. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Arielle, for the lecture.
Yes.
When someone is in autonomic dysautonomia, when they're in sympathetic for an extended period of time in a chronic situation,
Yeah.
I mean, you referenced that to fainting or immobilization, but when someone is an individual is in a chronic situation, how does that show up in the behavior when there's a sustained?
Yeah, like in chronic stressful situations where, again, there's no way out, and I just have to keep bearing one experience after another, and I have to keep mobilizing in order to meet all of those demands. Mm-hmm. And there's a few consequences that we can see happening. One is that, there's very often, like at some point, a cliff that we fall off into I am exhausted from having had to stay on. And there's also a certain amount of accommodation that happens having to stay on, that in some ways it's like the frog in the water story, where like the water is slowly boiling, slowly warming up, that we don't even recognize at some point the chronicity of the stress that we're in because we had to accommodate to it. And so sometimes we are so capable of meeting the chronicity of that stress that it's not until we go on vacation or we have this opportunity to rest and we're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea how exhausted I was because I was staying in the go. So it's in some ways a similar question to what I just spoke to a moment ago, of like really fine-tuning your awareness to recognizing the state, and then within that, what are the choices that I have in any given day, time, space to start to down-regulate out of that chronicity of stress so that I can take care of myself, even if I can't change the circumstances out there. How do I take care of myself as best as possible within those circumstances until maybe those lifestyle changes can be added in where I'm not living at that high stress level day to day anymore?
Sure. How physiologically does it show up with that kind of chronic sympathetic?
Chronic sympathetic. There's a book that's written by a man named Robert Scayer. It's called The Body Bears the Burden. He has two books. One, The Body Bears the Burden. The other is The Trauma Spectrum. One of the things that he talks about is the differentiation between when we're stuck in high sympathetic versus ongoing collapse parasympathetic. So one of the things that he cautions around staying in high sympathetic is that it's linked more to digestive distress, to cardiovascular distress, to heart disease, to even he links it more to cancer, because of we're not basically going into the parasympathetic immune response that would fight off or basically facilitate the cell death of abnormal cells. And so it puts us at more risk. Now, that's not to scare you, or maybe it is just a little bit, to say, like, this is how important it is to come back into balance. And I know you already know that. I mean, you're in this field. Mm. So it's very much about, like, that would be like the longer term consequence in terms of noticing physiologically. Mm-hmm. We're more muscularly on guard. We're going to have more of that jaw tension. We're going to have more chronic headaches. We're going to have more elevated heart rate, and we're going to have a reduced heart rate variability.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. All right, we've got a question back there, and we have one over here, and then I think we're going to call it a day. How about that? Yeah.
Thank you very much for everything. It's very enlightening, and the vagus nerve is new. I'm coming from, I've heard about it, but I haven't done much reading on it Anyway, my question is related to the heart, because I work with people, I have family members, and I have friends that have AFib.
Yeah.
And you talked about going down through and coming up, and I never really understood how the vagus nerve worked. And so how does it work? Is it a negative thing, a positive thing?
Yeah. Yeah. It's something that we can talk about a bit more tomorrow. Are you able to come back tomorrow?
Oh, yeah.
Good. I think we can go into greater depth tomorrow on that question, and then we'll have our movement practice. But the short answer to it is the vagal brake serves like a brake system. I'm sorry, the vagus nerve serves like a brake system. So if you think of our sympathetic nervous system like the gas pedal in our car, the vagus nerve serves like the brakes in our car, and will always be down regulating of that sympathetic system. And we have two vagal brakes, and this goes into the story about the dorsal and the ventral vagus nerve. I'm going to put a little bookmark to that story, and let's come back to it tomorrow.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. Over here. No, wait for the mic. It's easier. Yeah, thank you.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you so much. I was wondering if there are any techniques that you would recommend, even if they're one of the ones that you've already mentioned, that you would specifically suggest before sleeping. One thing I noticed is that I can have a day where at least I thought I was pretty relaxed, and then the second I put my head back, suddenly my heart starts like pattering, and I'm like, what is that about? Why?
My first response to you is you're asking a really important question. What is that about? When I go into an opportunity for rest, my heart rate increases, especially at night. And that right there is something to hold. Anya mentioned internal family systems or parts work. Hold the part of you with curiosity that goes into more of a sympathetic response when I have an opportunity to downregulate into sleep. There may be questions that you can ask of how is that feeling familiar? When is the first time that I remember an opportunity to rest, but a fright response comes in? And as you explore that, it's like the symptom is giving way to the opportunity to heal something from the past. So it's the unwinding of the trauma. Now, that said, yes, we can bring in practices that can help with sleep, but the first practice is always to be curious about the symptom, because if we go in just trying to make a symptom go away, we never hear its message, and it will just get louder. It's like, wait, you didn't hear me. You just tried to get rid of me. So that's part one. In terms of some practices, I would actually recommend doing daytime yogic sleep or yoga nidra as ways to explore with conscious awareness what happens when given the opportunity to go into restful states, and as a practice to then kind of experiment with what allows me to let go or surrender into gravity and to soften into stillness in ways where I can still have my upper vagus oriented to safe enough to rest and relax. Okay. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. An honor to be here and share this. We'll have our closing, and then we'll say our official goodbye for now.
So I think we want to give her another big hand. It sounds like it was really a wonderful program. Yeah. Here. And the reason we passed out the chat books is because on page 97, you'll find the Triambakam mantra. Triambakam mantra is prehistoric. It's in arguably the oldest written document on the planet. Probably comes from an oral tradition that's tens of thousands of years older than that. So you'll see above it, there's a little description of how it's chanted for birthdays, when people are transitioning, before you go on a journey. It prevents snake bites, all kinds of great stuff.
May I share something
sure,
about when it was taught to me? So this was a mantra that was given to me by my meditation teacher, and it was also a mantra that was given to me for protection. And as you're speaking about protection before travel, but protection before sleep. So this is a really powerful one maybe to also bring in, especially if some of that fear comes up around sleep. Yeah.
So when we chant this, it's like we're connecting to an ancient line of humanity that goes back before anybody knows. What's your name? Dasi. So we're going to, it's also traditional to chant this for birthdays, we'll chant it for Dasi's birthday. There's more than 30 people on the platform. We're going to chant it 3 times. So you're going to be 90 into your 108 with a lot of help from your friends, okay? So we'll chant Om 3 times and then the Triambaka mantra 3 times, and you can tune yourself to Dasi's birthday or to anybody you know who's in need, or to yourself if that's appropriate. So, Om, 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 Om. Triambakam yajamahe sugandim pushtavardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan brityor mokshya mamritat. Om Triambakam yajamahe sugandim pushtavardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan brityor mokshya mamritat. Om Triambakam yajamahe sugandim pushtavardhanam urvarukamiva bandhanan brityor mokshya mamritat. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace Peace Peace. Om Bolo Sakuru Shivananda Maharaja Ki Jai. Om Bolo Swami Vishnu Devananda Maharaja Ki Jai. Om Namah Shivaya Hari Om Tat Sat. Happy birthday.